Today's guest is a New York Times bestselling author celebrated for her powerful novels for young adults and middle grade readers. With books like One Crazy Summer, PSB 11, Gone Crazy in Alabama, and Clayton Bird Goes Underground, she has received numerous accolades, including the Newbery Honor and multiple Coretta Scott King Awards. Her stories are known for their rich historical settings, relatable characters, and themes of resilience and identity. She has inspired countless readers and writers with her work and mentorship. Please welcome Rita Williams-Garcia.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really nice to be able to talk to people about reading and writing and our basic freedoms. So this is a wonderful broadcast and forum. So thank you for doing this. I mean, I don't know too many teens who are wrapped up in this, and so your activism is just truly it's a wonderful thing, and it's a great model to let kids know that, hey, I have a voice and I can do something with it.
Yeah, well, here you're free to express as much as you want.
Oh my, are you sure about that? No, this has always been something of a dream of mine, to always be able to tell my stories and to impose no limits on what they have to say. Because I just feel that young people go through enough. There's so many restrictions on what we can talk about with them while they're going through the things that they are going through. Doesn't that sound ridiculous? It's an honor to be able to tell these stories through these characters, and it's even better when I know that I'm striking a chord, I'm making connections. Readers actually can grab a hold of these characters and feel what they're feeling and express themselves just through reading through their voices. So that's how I know that, okay, I'm not just telling a story, I am telling someone's story, someone who I don't know, who's far away, and who thinks no one knows what they're feeling, what they've experienced. And when they read it in a book, whether it's my book or someone else's book, then they know I'm not alone. And that's why all of our voices are so important.
I was reading your bio, and you mentioned asking for paper and a pencil in kindergarten, and by 12, you were already submitting stories to magazines. Looking back, what was it about storytelling that captured your interest so early on, and how has that drive shaped your approach to writing for young readers today?
Well, I have my sister and my mother to thank first and foremost. My sister was my first babysitter. So my mother has passed on to glory, and so I can say this: she used to leave us alone while she went to work. And when I say leave us alone, my sister was like 3 years old, my brother was like 2 years old, and I was like a year old. And my mother had a routine for my sister to follow, and my sister followed it. And one of those things was to make sure that the baby had her story. So my sister would always slide a book in the slats, between the slats of my wooden playpen, and I would turn the pages and follow the story, follow those pictures, and tell myself the story. And so from there, I always knew that story was in the world. And so I always had that feeling of, and what next? And then what next? And then. And so by the time I was in kindergarten, I was telling myself stories. I was writing in my own spelling, creative spelling. And so I wanted to tell more stories than to have people tell them to me. And my mother was just a very creative person who always pushed us to use our imaginations to see more than what was in front of us. And so I was always off on a faraway journey, kind of envisioning things that were possible, seeing myself on adventures, and then creating characters and putting them into adventures. And I just always knew this is what I want to do. I want to make these stories. And I want to see a book that says, by Rita Williams. At that time, it was just Rita Williams.
You've been recognized with many awards. How have these accolades impacted your journey as a writer, and what legacy do you hope your stories leave for young readers?
When I first began to write for young people, that was in the mid to late 80s. I told my then editor, don't go signing me up for any awards. Don't go nominating me for anything because I didn't know how it happened. I just want to tell my stories. Little did I know that she had nothing to do with that whole process. She just smiled and like said, "Okay, Rita." Anyway, but then as time went on, I began to understand a little bit more about awards, especially awards that are recognized by schools, because you're trying to send your books out there into the world, and the world for middle grade writers and young adult writers is schools and public libraries. And so when I got my first, first I got a Coretta Scott King Honor for Like Sisters on the Home Front, and that was in the mid 90s. And I didn't really know what that meant. So I just kind of went, oh, that's nice. A shiny medal. Well, then some 20 years later, when One Crazy Summer won the Coretta Scott King Author Award, the Newbery Honor, the Scott Odell Prize for Fiction, and it was a National Book Award finalist, and there were other medals as well. But when that happened, it changed my life. I was working full time for a company, and it made it possible for me to write full time and to not think about having a job. I was also teaching with Vermont College of Fine Arts, which was a great experience because I got to express myself in writerly terms, in craft terms to other writers. And that was something I never had before. So I couldn't just have all of my ideas and my visions in my head. I had to be able to express them so that other writers could make them useful. So that's what those medals have done for me. They've allowed me to write full time and to think as a writer thinks, and to also mentor other authors. It's kind of hard to mentor someone when you don't have any proof behind the pudding. So the medals really do help to kind of open up people to me, and I can reach them. I do like mentoring.
So they're kind of like credibility in a way.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. And they look pretty on the jacket too. I gotta tell you.
Powerful images like children in the Black Panther movement or dancing in New Orleans have sparked ideas for your stories. How do these moments shape your characters and the worlds you build around them?
Well, the first thing is to respect children, to respect their experiences, to know that they are just a part of the world turning as the adults who actually make those final shifts and turns and revolutions. Children are all a part of that. When I was down in New Orleans for a reading conference, every corner I turned, there were children with their little tip boxes dancing in the streets with bottle caps on their shoes. And I just thought, wow, this New Orleans culture is so rich, but we never think about the children, and yet the children are a part of it. So that's why I wanted to talk about the kids on Royal Street tapping with their homemade kind of tap shoes and earning their tips. And then the Black Panther era is a time that I grew up in. I was about 11 years old. I was 11 years old in 1968. And so I was reading the newspapers and watching TV and paying attention to what was going on, especially with the Black Power movement. And I mean, it was very exciting to see these very young people with their afros and their leather jackets and their Black Panther, like logo and everything, with their big ferocious words, and yes, some carried rifles, and but the most important thing that really spoke to me was the rhetoric, the speak. To hear Kathleen Cleaver, to hear Finney Shakur, to hear H. Rap Brown, these people speaking, that was just powerful. And so I learned a lot about the power of words. But then you saw the children not just having the breakfast, but also disseminating newspapers and being able to speak about some of the issues of the Black Panthers, which made me very jealous. I'm like, what? I was that kind of kid that would be jealous of someone else my age doing something, communication and literature and all of that. So, but they were also on the front lines. They were at the rallies. They were protesting in dangerous places, and some of them know a little something about shootouts. So it could be very dangerous for kids, but in many ways, from a community point of view, it was very nurturing. So I wanted to talk about that aspect, especially for kids who were being introduced to the movement for the first time.
With One Crazy Summer being challenged in some places, what are your thoughts on the role of literature in tackling complex historical and social issues for young readers? How do you feel about the growing movement to ban books?
Well, first of all, wherever young people go, our books must go. If young people are involved in movements, then the books have to go there too. If we're involved with a fight for our rights, whether it's in how we identify or just the fight for citizenship, or whatever personal rights, then the books have to go there also. Yes, my book has been challenged. I've been disinvited to schools. I think every writer who is telling the truth in some way, shape, or form have to come to expect that, because that is the reality of the world that we live in today. Part of me, because it's me, laughs at that, because it's just hard for me to respect people who live in fear. And I don't mean fear for their lives, but fear of thought, fear of others' experiences, fear that humanity might be catching. Oh my goodness, my children can't understand these people who are outside of them, because what would that possibly mean if they actually understood people other than their own familiar? Oh my, so part of me just thinks that's ridiculous. But I know enough to know that we have to be vigilant. We have to support our libraries. We have to support our librarians who are under siege, who really have to fight for their jobs and, in some cases, their well-being, because people are not just fighting back or protest or challenging with words and with laws. They can put people in harm's way just because they are providing books to young people. So, we have to be supportive of our teachers, of our librarians, and of bookstores, because there is even a concerted effort to close down bookstores. So we have to keep our eyes open, and we have to come together in numbers to support. And if we can, I'm hoping for a forum where people can talk to each other and listen to each other. I'm an idealist. I would like people to be able to do that without shouting and screaming at each other, so we can actually hear one another. Yes, I want it all. It's not going to change until we change, until we hear each other. My father was very fervent about democracy. That's what I'm fighting for. He was in the army, and he fought in Vietnam. He was stationed also in Korea during the 50s. And so he knew a little something about fighting. He was also a boxer and taught me a little something about boxing, but that's another story. Anyway, but he was always, every time his uniform was challenged, he was always saying, I am fighting for democracy. I am fighting for your right to say what you need to say. Now, when my teacher assigned The Catcher in the Rye to my class, my father was the first person to say, that book is nothing but pure filth. You're not reading it. So he taught us to be, both my mother and father taught us to be rebellious. So the first thing I did was I went to the library, checked it out, sat down, read the whole book, came back and said, I read it, Dad, and there's nothing wrong with it. I can't help but see the concerns of parents, even those of us who have the best of ideals for us, for our children. But we're operating in too much fear and not enough trust of the values that we place in our kids, in what we place in their hearts and souls. So I think we have to stop reacting to the fear and start talking, hopefully to one another.
How do you suggest people actually fight back against book bans?
The best thing to do is to know that the books are there and to constantly demand them. To constantly to buy the books, check them out at the library, join whatever your parent teacher association is, your school council, get on those committees and be in the places where people make those decisions. That's the problem, is that we're not, there's not enough of a balance of people with different ideas to help make those decisions and to come together and have compromises. That's where a lot of those decisions are going to be based upon who's making the decision. So we need a balance.
Looking to the future, are there any new projects or themes you're exploring that you can share with us? What's next for your writing journey?
Okay, well, I've already made the journey, so we're waiting for the whole editing process for me to make revisions. So I do have a book that's coming out, and it is a gaming novel, and it's called The Place of All Games, and it's about a group of boys who are, or so they think, who are raised apart from their society to fight a war. The manuscript was written about 12 years ago, but it wasn't quite ready. It was written in a language that only I could understand. I thought it was great, but thank goodness my editor realized, well, Rita, this needs a lot more clarification. And so I had to put it aside. But when I finally had time to really sit with it, I had that opportunity to revise it and make it better, to make it clearer. So it wasn't just a book that I loved, but everyone else could read it too. So maybe in a year or two, you might see that.
Rita, thank you so much for your time with us today. Your stories have given us rich perspectives on history, family, and self-discovery. We are grateful for the very powerful and relatable characters you bring to life and the impact of your work on readers everywhere. We can't wait to see what story you'll tell us next. Thank you for being with us, Rita.
Thank you for having me.